system ahead of a bigger venture that's in 4 years' time, which will search for any life on Mars. Well, the probe has travelled more than 300 million miles, that's 480 million kilometres, on a journey that's taken 7 months. And when it entered Mars's atmosphere, it was travelling at a staggering 13,000 miles an hour. That's nearly 21,000 kilometres an hour. Our science editor David Schuckman sent this report from Mission Control in Germany.
Nervous times in Mission Control. Flight engineers wondering why the signal from their spacecraft suddenly stopped a minute before landing.
We expected it to continue, but clearly it did not.
They have managed to get an orbiting spacecraft to circle Mars, but the lander is key to future exploration. The tantalizing question is whether the great canyons and craters scarring the surface of Mars might not be as barren as they look. So this mission is testing new ways of getting there. An animation shows how the lander was ejected from an orbiter. Then the key stages of the descent. A heat shield to cope with the Martian atmosphere. A parachute deploying at just the right time before tiny rockets break the fall, with a final drop onto the surface. This is a replica of the lander. It's about the same size. It looks like something out of Doctor Who, but it's designed to pave the way to a new understanding of Mars. A lot can be learned by orbiting Mars. That's how we got these pictures. But the key to the search for life is landing.
It's the door to future exploration. It's the door to getting people on Mars, exploring Mars with rovers. And if you want to search for signs of life and find them physically, you've got to get down to the surface and do it.
The plan is to follow today's mission with a robotic rover in 4 years' time. It's possible there used to be life on Mars, and maybe there still is. A drill will try to find out. All this is very poignant for British science. Remember the Beagle 2 spacecraft and its charismatic mastermind Colin Pillinger. His mission to Mars in 2003 didn't work. He died 2 years ago, but his legacy lives on.
For us, I think we've got a great sense of pride that actually the legacy Dad left behind is not necessarily Beagle 2 and the instruments and the technology, but is the fact that he was so inspirational to the people who are currently involved in these missions.
The big puzzle is whether we're alone in the universe, and each mission to Mars takes us closer to the answer. David Schuckman, BBC News at Mission Control in Germany.
Well, our science correspondent Palab Ghosh joins us now from Mission Control. Palab, so celebrations, but not quite out of the woods yet.
Not out of the woods because we don't know what's happened to the lander. And I have to say, at the moment, it's not looking good for a successful landing. We've had 2 separate methods to try and confirm that it landed safely. Neither have confirmed that. We're expecting another tranche of data in about an hour's time. We'll have a clearer idea of what happened. With me to talk through what might or might not have happened is a scientist from ESA, Detlev Koshnoi. Detlev, could you just tell me where we are with the lander? We lost transmission from the lander about a minute before it landed. Did it land successfully or did it crash land?
Well, we actually, as you properly said, we don't know yet precisely. So what happened was that when the lander enters the atmosphere, it sends out a signal which is monitored or was monitored by a radio array in India. Now, the signal was very weak. This was an experimental test to see whether we can do that. And that indeed was when at some point we lost the transmission. But it wasn't clear whether it's just maybe the weak signal. We now had the same signal transmitted to us by our Mars Express orbiter, and the data is inconclusive, so we just don't know. And we will know when we have a contact with another
Well,
American
we're seeing
spacecraft.
celebrations of the successful insertion of the orbit of the orbiter, but you're saying that the results from the Mars Express orbiter, the stronger signal, was inconclusive. What do you mean by that?
Well, the signal, you have a certain expectation on what you want to see. But we do this the first time, so we may simply not be understanding the data properly, and that's why we really have to wait until the acquisition of our signal by the American orbiter.
So you're hoping that you'll either find out that it's landed successfully. If it hasn't, then it really isn't looking good.
If indeed then we don't get a signal from the lander, then the lander is not functioning properly. But let's be positive, we still have some time, and also the orbiter works apparently very nice.
Detlef, thank you very much. So still an anxious wait. We'll have more for you in an hour or so, and in the meantime, everyone here is firmly crossing their fingers. Back to you.
So are we, Palab, so are we. We want to report on some good news in an hour. Thank you for that. If the first two are anything to go by, this last US presidential debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will see yet more personal accusations fly. With 3 weeks to go, the final head-to-head encounter in Las Vegas in a few hours' time is an opportunity for Donald Trump to reverse the recent losses he's had in the polls. The BBC poll of polls currently gives Hillary Clinton a 9-point lead. Here's our North America editor, John Sopel.
Las Vegas. This is a city where you can win big and invariably lose even bigger, where dreams are made and destroyed. Most things that Donald Trump has touched have turned to gold. His tower dominates the skyline. But in this presidential race, he's starting to fall behind.
When they go low, you go high.
And whisper it quietly, he might end up the loser.
Because you'd be in jail.
So tonight, in the final debate, Donald Trump, like never before, needs to win big.
But how to play it? Does he gamble on a scorched earth policy in an attempt to drag Hillary Clinton down? Or does he try to look presidential, calm and measured, and put his chips on winning over undecided voters?
Hi Annika, my name is Maria. I'm a volunteer with the Nevada Democratic Party. How are you today?
But put the debate to one side. Politics is about the grunt work, the slog, and this is where Hillary Clinton is better resourced and better organised.
I was calling to see if we still have your support for Hillary Clinton.
More field offices, more staff, and in South Nevada alone have registered 150,000 more Democratic voters than the Trump campaign have Republicans.
The next 3 weeks will yield more conversations with voters around the country, more knocking of doors, more phone calls, more volunteers getting out to vote, and really the excitement of the electorate who is continuing to tune in more and more every day.
This is one of Donald Trump's only offices in Nevada, and we weren't allowed in to film. His campaign team never returned our calls. But we caught up with his supporters downtown as they waited for Donald Trump to arrive. They may not have infrastructure, but they have a massive enthusiasm.
Awesome! Every time I've gone to any type of rally, there's a lot of people showing up. They're showing up because there is a ground game.
He's not getting a fair shake, and that's why I'm here. He's going to change our country. He's going to do really good for our country.
Moments after that, Donald Trump's convoy swept into the hotel. He needs a small miracle tonight to turn things round. But Nevada is full of people convinced their luck is about to change. John Sopel, BBC News, Las Vegas.
Well, our correspondent Kim Gattis is also in Las Vegas for us. Kim, we can all have a lot of fun with the cliches around it being held in Las Vegas, the place where people gamble. You heard John there say where there's big winners and big losers. But actually, this is really serious, going by what John is saying there. Mr. Trump has really got to try and turn things around tonight.
Yes, he really does. This is his last chance to try to turn around his campaign, his last opportunity to be on a national stage speaking to millions of voters across the country, not just those of his supporters who show up at his rallies, but millions of Americans who will be tuning into this debate tonight. We don't expect that the number of people tuning in is going to be as high as the first debate, which set a record with 84 million people, but still there is a lot at stake. And for Hillary Clinton, this is also an opportunity to try to close the deal. Donald Trump has had a rough 10 days, but she's also had to battle back against all these emails that are coming out, emails that were hacked from her campaign manager's account that shows some of the inner workings of the campaign. And if she weren't running against someone like Donald Trump, who's had his own troubles, she'd be having a harder time as well in this portion of the election cycle. But she is on average 9 points ahead in most polls. She is crucially ahead in battleground states, even making inroads in traditionally Republican states like Arizona. So for her tonight, it is about closing the deal and putting forward a positive vision, not just telling people not to vote for Trump.
Kim, briefly, how much should we actually read into these polls, though? We know there are undecided voters, but we also know that there are possibly silent Trump voters as well that don't necessarily want to admit that they're voting for Donald Trump.
That is the big unknown, and of course, the Clinton campaign will certainly be looking closely at that. Donald Trump says that he has a lot of enthusiasm on his side, that he will bring out a lot of new voters to the polls as well. But his allegations that the system is rigged, that the election is rigged, is also risking to depress voter turnout, which is a problem for both candidates.
Kim, you and John are in for an interesting night tonight. Much more from you throughout the next few hours, no doubt, in Las Vegas. It's going to be an exciting night for you as well, if you want to tune in. It is the third presidential debate, live from Las Vegas, and it's here on BBC World News. There's also plenty of campaign analysis at bbc.com/news. There's an article there that actually looks at whether a US election could be rigged, and even if that's possible, as Donald Trump, as you heard Kim saying, is claiming. The exodus from Mosul has started. Thousands have escaped the city and surrounding area since a major Iraqi offensive against so-called Islamic State militants got underway 3 days ago. And the numbers are only going to increase, with the United Nations preparing for what they fear could be the biggest man-made humanitarian crisis in recent times. Our correspondent Jonathan Beale has been with a Iraqi Rapid Reaction Unit and sent this report from just near the town of Al-Qayyura.
There was a brief pause and a chance to regroup before the Iraqi army resumed its offensive on Mosul. Around 70 villages still have to be cleared before they reach the city itself, 30 miles away. We travelled with General Abbas as he prepared to advance. So-called Islamic State or Daesh fighters had already been spotted.
I'm going to put my troops to the left side to avoid the village. Daesh, they are going to be scared. After that, the coalition forces, they will attack these guys outside the village. Our goal is the citizen. Be safe.
We inched forward cautiously. And then, without warning, this. 3 suicide truck bombs were approaching at speed. They put their foot down, taking evasive maneuvers. 2 attackers never reached their target. The Iraqi army finished off the third.
Dangerous? Danger meet here. Danger job, yeah. We fight. We are a fighter. You know, we are a soldier.
Are you worried about truck bombs, the threat it is to your men?
Yeah, I will be worried because there are no men.
Reinforcements arrived with reports of more IS fighters on the move. They were soon spotted by his tank. While some of them were killed, most managed to escape. Back on the move, but it wasn't long before we were halted in our tracks. There were repeated harrying attacks. In one afternoon, they'd barely moved forward a mile. And the fight's expected to be much tougher in Mosul, still 30 miles away. As we hastily pulled back, our Humvee crashed.
We've been coming under heavy fire. We're travelling up this road. Had to reverse rapidly. The vehicle got stuck in a wadi. We had to come running back, and they're now engaged.
Our stranded Humvee and a trail of destruction suggest this will not be over quickly. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Bashmana village.
Well, that's the scene at the front line. Meanwhile, our correspondent Richard Galpin is in the Iraqi Army Air Base. That's right in Ul-Qayyara itself, just south of Mosul. And he's been explaining that the Iraqi Army is making slow but steady progress.
What we know is that the Iraqi Army, this is actually the operations command here at this base. Obviously a lot of troops around here and a lot of equipment as well, although most has gone up north from the road here towards Mosul. We know that the Iraqi Army have been pushing this offensive. They've been trying to move further up those roads towards the city, but certainly one of my colleagues was with one Iraqi Army unit, and there they came under pretty fierce fire. The Islamic State militants were using mortars and rockets, as well as, of course, machine guns, and there was panic at one stage when the soldiers believed that 3 vehicles which had suddenly appeared from a village nearby and were driving towards them, they assumed that they were suicide bombers and panicked and started to run away. So obviously that will be of concern for the Iraqi command if that kind of incident is repeated. But what the Iraqi army is saying officially is that they are making slow, steady progress up the road towards Mosul.
Richard Galpin there. Let's have a look at some other of the day's news. And the UK government has ruled out using dental checks to verify the age of child migrants who are arriving from Calais. There is concern that some of those being allowed to enter Britain are adults. A call from the Conservative British politician David Davis to carry out dental checks to establish their age has been criticised as unethical. Indonesia's president says his government's new policy of chemically castrating paedophiles could wipe out sex crimes. Speaking exclusively to the BBC, Joko Widodo said he respected human rights, but there could be no compromise when it came to punishing sex offenders. In the first case of its kind at the International Criminal Court, the former Congolese Vice President Jean-Pierre Bemba has been found guilty of bribing witnesses at his war crimes trial. Judges ruled that Mr. Bemba and 4 of his aides offered money and other inducements to 14 witnesses and coached them in what to say. In Hong Kong, pro-Beijing politicians blocked the swearing-in of 2 new lawmakers who want a split from China, the latest incident in an increasingly divided parliament. It comes as fears grow in the semi-autonomous city that China is tightening its grip. Danny Vincent reports, and just a warning, there's some flash photography.
Another week, another Hong Kong swearing-in ceremony. Last week, 3 lawmakers' oaths to the government rejected. Today was their second chance to pledge their allegiance. Instead, more chaos ensued, this time from the pro-Beijing camp. A mass walkout triggering the end of the session. Inside, a mini-parliament paralysed. Yao Wai-ching and her colleague, Sixtus Baggio, were prevented from swearing in.
I think the one who should apologise to the whole Hong Kongers should be the pro-Beijing camp's lawmakers, but not me. Because they're the one who are betraying Hong Kongers.
Last week, the newly elected activists used the swearing-in ceremony as a stage for protest. Today, a protest against the would-be lawmakers.
They can't be our legislators because they are the running dogs of Japan. They call China China, but we are China. It's an insult to China, and it's an insult to Chinese people living in Hong Kong. It's an insult to 1.3 billion Chinese people.
Hong Kong is moving into new political territory. Some want more independence from the Beijing government. Others see China's rise as an opportunity for Hong Kong.
They really have gone too far. They owe us an apology. I think they actually provoke a lot of Hong Kong people because they are simply provoking all Chinese people. So they do owe us an apology.
For now, Hong Kong is in the middle of a political deadlock. 2 weeks, 2 suspensions of the council, and the future of 2 political activists hangs in the balance. Danny Vincent, BBC News, Hong Kong.
300 years ago, the first Russian Orthodox Church opened in Britain. This week, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, travelled to the UK to mark the anniversary. He is a controversial figure and a strong supporter of President Putin, calling his tenure a miracle of gold.
Сегодняшняя война с терроризмом, она должна быть общей. Это не дело только России, это дело всех стран. Мы должны сплотиться для того, чтобы победить это зло. И вот эту войну я называю священной.
Да, сейчас все получится. Давайте на один телефон, чтобы проще.
It's almost a year since the world watched in horror as the Paris attacks unfolded. In the aftermath, the words of one man seemed to capture the mood of the moment. It was Antoine Léris. His wife, Hélène, died in the Bataclan theatre. His letter, addressed to the attackers, titled "You Will Not Have My Hate," was viewed by tens of millions of people online. He discussed his new book and the impact of that letter with our Europe editor, Damien Grammaticus.
On Friday night, you stole away the life of an exceptional being, the love of my life, the mother of my son, but you will not have my hatred. I do not know who you are, and I don't want to know. You are dead souls.
That was a year ago. Today, Antoine Léris remains, defiant, dignified, as determined not to hate.
For me, it's the only way to not fall in craziness, not turn mad. So I stick to it. Yes, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes hate come and knock on my door and say, hey, I'm there. I'm simple, I'm easy, I'm comfortable. And you can go with me. It will be easier for you. But I just let her out of our house, and yes, I think it was the good choice for us, the only choice.
But not an easy choice. His new book is an intimate diary, how he dealt with the loss of his wife Hélène at the Bataclan.
When you close a dead person's eyes, you give them back a little bit of life. She looks like the woman I watch wake up each morning. I want to lie next to her languorous body, warm her up, tell her she is the most beautiful woman I ever met. It was like the walls of my room when I was alone were about to fall on me, and I was like suffocating, and it was like, but writing was an open door to a land of freedom.
So writing has been Antoine's escape, a way to keep alive his connection with his wife. He buried Hélène here in Montmartre, and while he bears no hatred towards her killers, there is one thing Antoine has refused to relinquish: his grief.
Grief is a companion for me. It's precious. I want to keep it with me.
Because it's a connection to your wife? To
because it's a testimony of, like even a physical testimony, you know? You felt it inside you very strongly. It's a testimony of how I loved Hélène.
Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Paris.
And that's all for now from me and all of the team. Thanks for watching.